Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. We say hello again to Christopher Dickey, who's the foreign editor, as well as Pierre Aski, co-founder of Rue 89, 89th Street, the news website. His latest book, The Right to Happiness. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Angela Diffley of sister station Radio France International, and here from Madrid, our Spain correspondent, Sarah Morris. We were talking before the break about China, and given a chance to show its soft power when it comes to climate change by the fact that it is making the switch to renewables. China throwing its muscle about, this with online petitions and calls to boycott French companies, this after several nights of protest in Paris against the shooting death by police of a 56-year-old man they say attacked them with scissors when they were called for a disturbance. His family says Xiao Yao Liu was cutting fish and a threat to nobody.
We ask only for truth. We ask for human rights, because it's not right. So that's why we changed here, to get rid of the politics things. We want only simple, very clear and pure justice.
I think that if we remain silent, if we let things go without saying anything, it's unacceptable.
The police can kill you in front of your family with your children watching. How is that possible? I want the truth. I think the entire community wants the truth.
Pierre Aski is a former Beijing correspondent. What's your reaction when you see the Chinese community vocal like this over this incident?
It's quite new in France. The Chinese community used to be invisible, as we said, but it's changed because there's been a lot of crimes and insecurity within where the Chinese communities are located. And particularly a few months ago, there was a man who was murdered by thugs who wanted to rob him in the northern suburbs of Paris. And there was a huge mobilization, unprecedented mobilization. I mean, the Place de la République, which is the central square where all demonstrations are held, was really covered with people coming to demonstrate. And that was very new. This time it's a bit different because it's the police who killed the man. It's not thugs. And suddenly the whole thing has changed because the Chinese community was asking the police for protection, and all of a sudden it's the police who's being accused. And so you have this community which is not used to public expression, to organization. There are accusations that the Chinese authorities are keeping a tight lead on the community, and that's probably true, that Beijing is really all over the world trying to prevent those communities where they are big enough to be attracted by Taiwan or by dissidents, so they keep a very tight control of what's happening within the communities, and so you have that playing again in this situation.
Well, we did hear in the reactions there, that one woman saying, "We came here for human rights and democracy, not for this." And
yes, this is right, but this is joining with other communities complaining about police brutality. We've had recently a young black kid who was killed by police, and it created riots in the south of Paris. So you have a lot of debate within the immigrants or descendants of immigrants communities in France about the attitude of the police, which is accused of being having racist attitudes and being overly brutal with their management of control.
Angela Diffley, we've seen these past months incidents in both directions. There were police that were targeted in a southern suburb. Their car was firebombed, and by it appears drug peddlers. And as a result, we saw demonstrations by police saying they didn't get enough support from the state. And we've had, as Pierre Aski mentioned, demonstrations against police brutality.
Yeah, it is extraordinary when you think that after the Charlie Hebdo and after the Bataclan, there was a tremendous surge of support everywhere in France towards the police. They were seen as protecting everybody. Everybody was extremely grateful. On occasions, they were clapped when they arrived in places. And It's difficult to work out exactly what's gone wrong. They have been the target of some very vicious attacks. There were also this, as you mentioned, the affaire Théo recently, where they were accused of brutality, and the Chinese incident. Now, I think the Chinese incident should be seen, as you say, Pierre, against the background of the fact that the Chinese have been the targets of a lot of criminal activity, both tourists arriving in China and particularly the Chinese community here. And it received very little media coverage, very little debate was held about it. And I think, rightly or wrongly, they have come to the conclusion that in order to have people discussing their problems, they need to make a bit more noise, and before this happened, the National Front were actually targeting the Chinese community in the suburbs of Paris because they have been seen as targets for criminals because they apparently frequently walk around with cash, and so they have been the subject of a lot of criminality and were seen as people who would support the case for better law and order, who would line up behind the National Front in supporting the police. This has upturned things slightly.
Reaction on the hashtag F24 debate. Chinese communities anywhere in the world are the most hardworking and peaceful people in those countries. If they're protesting against police brutality in France, there must be a reason for it. Christopher Dickey, your thoughts when you see the sour relations between police and in working class neighborhoods here? Is it just a story that's the same everywhere around the globe, or is there a particular French problem?
Policing is very, very hard work, very difficult to do. I would hate to be the cop who shot that man and then had to say he was attacking me with scissors. I think there's something that just feels really off about that story. We don't really know. Supposedly the police went there for a domestic dispute. Always a problematic environment because everybody turns against you. Everybody was fighting each other. And then the guy is in the kitchen, supposedly, and comes out with scissors and he gets shot. That's really strange. So I think that may be a rather special incident. But these other cases, they read like something that you would have heard about in Philadelphia 20 years ago, or in the worst environments in the United States. The Theo case, where the man was not killed, but he was sodomized with a billy club. What was that about? What kind of anger is involved in that kind of action? I think the police here feel that they're under attack. I think that in the banlieue, in the housing projects, I think that the kids feel that they're under attack. And it's a very ugly scene. And in some of these areas, there really is lawlessness. I mean, if you go to some of the housing projects in Marseille, there's just no law at all down there.
And I know nothing about the details of either the Theo case or the recent case, so wouldn't want to talk about those. But it is the case that the police are under tremendous stress at the moment in France. There is the obvious terrorism threat. The country's in a state of emergency, and against that there's an awful lot of social unrest for political reasons and people angry about all sorts of things. So,
angry with all sorts of things 3 weeks before the first round of the French presidential election. And let's give you an update. We know the right is in disarray. Conservative candidate François Fillon is so mired in scandal that he has scrapped his campaign slogan, "The Courage of the Truth," in favor of "A Will for France." That's his new strap. The disarray, by the way, is also on the left, though. Former Prime Minister Manuel Valls, who lost the socialist primaries against Benoît Hamon, ditching his more left-wing opponent in favor of an endorsement for the more centrist independent candidate, Emmanuel Macron.
I don't think we should take any risks for the country, and so I will vote Emmanuel Macron.
With enthusiasm?
No, I'm taking on my responsibilities. This isn't about love for the candidate. This is about being reasonable.
All right. Emmanuel Valls, they're saying that it's because of the National Front, the threat of the National Front winning, that he cannot vote for the nominee of his own party. Is that the kiss of death for the Socialist Party?
Well, what is happening is, I think, of historical proportions, is that the people who have governed this country for the past 50 years are losing this election. That means both the Republican Party, which is a heir of the Gaullist trend, and the Socialists, who have been managing for in alternance for the past decades. And both these governing parties are going to be left out of the second round. And those three candidates who are at the moment with the most dynamic campaign are the people who didn't take part in the primaries of either the left or the right. That is Marine Le Pen. She has her own party, and there was no question. Emmanuel Macron, who broke ranks with the government last summer and has created his own movement and is at the center of the political spectrum. And Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the radical left, who broke with the Socialist Party 10 years ago and has created a big challenge to the Socialist Party and is now running ahead of the official candidate from the Socialist Party. So you have this situation where whatever happens, obviously a lot can happen in 3 weeks, but it seems that none of the major parties will be included. That means we have a complete turning of the tables in French politics, which I think is something which a lot of people were waiting for, because the system was blocked, the system was paralyzed, and the past decade with Sarkozy and Hollande hasn't produced any results in citizens' eyes.
Pierre, you're sitting next to somebody who's a bit of an expert now on paralyzed systems, because we had two or three general elections in Spain.
We nearly had a third.
We
had 10 months of paralysis. Yes.
And in it we saw the ruling Conservatives scraping through, but the Socialists, they had a lot of their support picked off by the far left. And so when you look at France, do you get the sense that what ails the center left is the same the whole continent over, or is this a very French story?
No. I think this is a very European story about social democracy, and it seems like there's parallel lives with the French and the Spanish socialists. I mean, the socialists in Spain haven't got a leader. They threw out their leader, Pedro Sanchez, and they must replace him. And the kind of debates that are going on in Spain are very similar to France. Pedro Sanchez is trying to make a comeback, but he seems to have decided, let's go further left, let's try and win the voters. He's in a sense the Benoît Hamon, and somebody will try to take the centrist role. It seems a very similar story, and it looks as if a lot of the socialists, when they pick their leader in May, if Pedro Sanchez manages to win, they might say exactly like Manuel Valls, we can't get behind our old leader. What happens then? Do the Spanish socialists break up? Do they survive? It's a real difficult time, I think, across Europe.
And in Britain, of course.
Absolutely. Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, there's one everywhere. I think, to get back to France, I think that it is a problem for Macron having all these refugees coming from the Socialist Party.
Well, especially Valls.
MPs, particularly, Valls is toxic to many socialist supporters anyway. But Macron wanted to position himself in the centre, and increasingly his party is starting to look like a recycling ground for people fleeing the Socialist Party, MPs and indeed supporters. And that has is likely to drag him slightly to the left. He hasn't in any way bargained with them or even asked for their support. So in that sense, he hasn't offered them anything and doesn't have to move to the left. But because of the political spectrum as it is at the moment, it's dragging him a bit to the left.
All right, an op-ed piece that was written by a physicist, his name is Serge Galem, is making a lot of noise in this country. He's a guy who's big on statistics. He correctly predicted Brexit. He's part of what they call the Sevipov Political Research Institute. He's worried about turnout. He said, for example, Marine Le Pen could poll at 41% of votes on the eve of the election and wake up with 50.3% of ballots cast. It would not be the fault of pollsters or of a multi-tiered system like in the US, but more mundanely because of the skewed role of the abstention rate. He adds, after having gone from impossible to improbable, the election of Le Pen as president of the Republic in 2017 is now sliding from the improbable to the very possible. And one of the things that's making people fret as we get closer to election day, Christopher Dickey, is that the second round takes place in the middle of a long weekend.
Well, that's a killer right there. I hadn't even thought of that. But yes, that certainly is going to be a problem. Abstention is going to be a problem. But it's also, in this respect, there are a lot of things that are not like the American elections, but Le Pen's base is very enthusiastic about her. whereas the basis for the other candidates, they're not terribly enthusiastic. Fillon's base is not terribly enthusiastic. Macron's base, sort of enthusiastic. And on the left, we know everything's divided. So I think that if it comes down to Macron and Le Pen, yes, abstention will be a big problem, but the other issue is going to be the debate. I think this is an election that will essentially be decided by the debates.
The debate between the two rounds of the election, or because
both debates. I think that the first.
There's one more debate coming up. We've already had one.
Yes, there's one more, and it'll come up, and
there are two more before the first round and one between the two rounds.
Right.
Yeah. But the abstention is very interesting because usually, I mean, in the past 20 years, presidential elections have had very high turnout, like 80%, contrary to the other local elections, which have increasing.
Because the French understand that's the race that matters the most.
And at this stage, about 30% of people are threatening not to vote, which would go into that expert's prediction that a lower participation makes, obviously, Marine Le Pen go up. But my feeling, I might be wrong, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think that before the second round, if there's any chance that Marine Le Pen could win, a lot of people will review their stand of not going to vote. A lot of people are now saying, and I know many of them, we did that in 2002 when Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, was on the second round. Everybody went to vote for Jacques Chirac, 80%. And nothing happened afterwards because Chirac didn't use that consensus to reform really things. And a lot of people are saying never again. And my feeling is that if by not voting they give a chance to Marine Le Pen to win, a lot of people who are still opposed to her more than anything else will think twice and will, in the end, go to vote.
God willing.
And I think Europe will be a big factor, her stance on Europe, as well as everything else. I think there will be many people who will be very fearful of that.
Well, I wonder whether the Russian element will come in here, too, because she really does. I mean, what's the biggest endorsement that Marine Le Pen has gotten?
Vladimir Putin.
Yes. I mean, how does that look for a nationalist? Somehow they're able to square this, but just as someone who's coming in a little bit from the outside, it seems very strange for Marine Le Pen to want to go and get the endorsement of the leader of Russia.
But François Fillon is very ambiguous and very complacent on
oh, and Mélenchon too. No, I know.
And so for a voter of the traditional right, Putin is not such a big deal.
All right, before we go, I just want to tell you it was the week that South Africa paid a fond farewell to one of Nelson Mandela's closest comrade in arms, Ahmed Kathradi, who was sentenced alongside Mandela at the 1964 Rivonia trial and who would spend more than a quarter century behind bars. He was one of the wise elders of the anti-apartheid movement at 87 when he passed away. His funeral, though, became something of a political event unto its own, with the president asked to stay away amid a swell of rumors that Jacob Zuma was about to sack the respected finance minister, Pravin Gordhan, and replace him with a Zuma loyalist in what the South African press describes now as a night of long knives. That sacking did happen, part of a cabinet reshuffle that's got the currency tanking and Zuma braving new challenges to his rule.
I've decided to make changes to the national executive in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness.
We don't need anybody's brown bag. And we hope that more and more South Africans will make it absolutely clear that our country is not for sale.
Our country's not for sale. We don't need any more brown bags. Pierre Haski, how do you contrast when this week was supposed to be about Ahmed Kathrada, and instead it's about this incredible blow-up inside the ANC?
And it's about Zuma's presidency, whether it will be in a position to continue. You know, he has his vice president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and some of the top ANC leaders who have come out, including the parliamentary group chief, who have come out against the reshuffle and the sacking of the finance minister. The financial situation of the country is going down, and so there's an open political crisis which has in the background the succession to Jacob Zuma. Zuma would like to privilege his former wife, Mrs. Dlamini Zuma, who was the head of the African Union, and against Cyril Ramaphosa, his vice president, who is the man who was the negotiator for the South African constitution at the time of the transition when Mandela was released. So you have this very complicated situation, but at the center of it you have a corruption case which is huge, which is blatant, and even the ANC cannot accept it and close its eyes, even if it's threatened now with splitting and losing power. So you have this explosive situation which we should be watching very closely, because it might also come out in the streets.
Right, the ANC possibly losing power, you say. That's something we'll talk about in future editions. It'd be something that would have been unthinkable in the past. I want to thank Pierre Aski. I want to thank Sarah Morris, Angela Diffley, and Christopher Dickey. It is time now for Media Watch. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
You begin with the United States.
I will do. I just need to get rid of the blue screen of death from the computer, which is always a bit of a problem. There we go.
Okay.
Yes, General Mike Flynn has his words coming back to haunt him today. This was, of course, the man who barely got his feet under the desk as the National Security Advisor before he was fired. And he's back in the spotlight now. Then, of course...
Because he's asking for immunity.
Exactly. And apparently isn't going to get it, or at least not at the moment. BuzzFeed has put it rather nicely on their homepage, person of Flinterest. They want the federal investigation into Russia's supposed meddling in the the election in the United States, wants to speak to Michael Flynn, but he wants immunity before he will do so. This Twitter user coming up with another nice pun. Is he trying to avoid self-Flynn-crimination?
Oh, dear.
But, of course, the thing that's coming back to haunt him are his own words from September last year, when he talked about... it was quite strange, really. He went on the NBC's Meet the Press programme last September, was asked a question that had no relation whatsoever to Hillary Clinton and her aides and the email controversy. But this is the answer that he gave. Take a listen.
The very last thing that John Podesta just said is no individual too big to jail. That should include people like Hillary Clinton. I mean, 5 people around her have been given immunity, to include her former chief of staff. When you are given immunity, that means that you've probably committed a crime.
So there you go. When you are given immunity, that means that you've probably committed a crime. It is an unfortunate thing for him to have said, given everything that's come up now. Donald Trump, though, has come to his defence, saying this: Mike Flynn should ask for immunity, in that this is a witch hunt, excuse for big election loss by media and Democrats of historic proportion. I'm not even going to begin to go into the inaccuracies in that tweet, but basically he is riding to the defence of Mike Flynn. But he himself, obviously, has said very much the opposite out on the campaign trail, repeatedly questioning why Hillary Clinton's aides needed immunity. And back in September, 2 days after that interview from Mike Flynn, he was on the road in Florida and he said, if you're not guilty of a crime, what do you need immunity for? Almost exactly the same sentiments. Flynn's lawyer has released a statement today, and it makes quite remarkable reading. I think he must be enjoying his moment in the spotlight. He begins it with this line: General Flynn certainly has a story to tell, and he very much wants to tell it should the circumstances permit. That is the line, of course, that has been picked up by The Atlantic in their piece, and it's a very good recap, really, on the whole General Flynn affair, what he's done, what he's accused of. And they point out that although a request for immunity isn't an admission of guilt or wrongdoing, they say one reason why he could be seeking it is he's already been interviewed by the FBI, and there were questions raised when he was sacked. Did he lie to the FBI? Because because that predated him being sacked. If that happens, he would be open to prosecution. So a lot of people wondering that. Fans of Hillary Clinton and Democrats in general having a bit of fun online today with things like this. Flynn said on the campaign trail, if I did 1/10 of what Hillary Clinton did, I'd be in jail. And you've got pictures of Clinton and Obama having a good chuckle about it. Lots of things like that. And again, another one of his famous campaign trail shouts, lock her up. And you've got Hillary Clinton having a good chuckle.
All right. Tomorrow's a big day for fake news, I believe.
Well, yes, but it started early, and some people really aren't too happy about it.
It's April Fool's Day.
It's April Fool's Day, or something to do with fish in this country. I've never quite understood it. But Mashable says it's April Fool's Day, not week, and this madness needs to stop, because lots and lots of companies...
What's, like they're going early for April Fool's Day?
Yes, because it falls on a Saturday, and they say that businesses want to get in their brand-focused exposure and prove their corporation is fun. Mashable, not getting into the spirit of things at all. It's dumb, it's wrong, and it's even a little dangerous, they say. Now, just to fill you in, some of the things that have caught the imagination. Lyft, the ride-hailing app, came out with this saying, you wear this whizzy thing on your thumb and that's how you hail a ride from now on. Krispy Kreme donuts actually fooled the Daily Mirror. They wrote an article about how Krispy Kreme is changing its name in the United Kingdom because British people keep calling it Krispy Kreme, giving it the French pronunciation. So it would be changed to cream. Now, of course, it's not true, but the Daily Mirror said there is a chance it could be an April Fool, but it would be terribly unfair for them to do it early. Really not impressed at all.
All right. Well, the crème de la crème of media coverage with James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.